On the news front today, the government's announced a £1 billion fund to help pupils catch up on schooling that they have missed. But is that as good as it sounds? If children can't return until September, that will be, for many of them, 6 months out of the classroom.
Yeah, it's a lot of time. So can we get them back any earlier? If so, how? Well, let's get the view from former Education Secretary Lord Blunkett. He served in Tony Blair's Labour government. Lord Blunkett, good morning. What do you think about the children going back to school? When do you think they should go back? And is it safe for them to go back?
OK, firstly, I'm very pleased to welcome the money. It would be churlish not to. But, of course, it doesn't mean that children will be going back to school any more quickly than was envisaged yesterday. So I think we need to say to schools and to local authorities and to the trusts that run some of the schools, why don't we get together and see if we can make something of this money immediately? Because there's three elements to it. There's the 1% uplift that they promised for schools, and that could be used for getting children back more quickly with creativity and imagination. I'll come to that in a moment. The second is that they obviously need the money to be able to pay for facilities. The third is the 350 million they've allocated for tutoring. And again, that's very welcome, but it's online, apparently. This is what they're envisaging. And a lot of children, as you know, and you've probably been dealing with it on the programme previously, a lot of youngsters still haven't got the equipment at home. They promised 230,000 computers. I think 100,000 have been delivered. The Minister of State, Nick Gibb, this morning claimed that they were all on their way. Well, we heard all about that with testing and tracing, didn't we? So there's a lot to go at, actually, Ruth, and we need to pull together to make it work.
When you say come together, I mean, that's a big shortfall of, well over 100,000 computers. How do we come together to make that happen?
Well, on the computer front, I think there are lots of companies, even those who have had to purchase computers for their own staff at home, who would be prepared to help. The Guardian newspaper used to run a scheme for refurbishing computers, and I think there are a lot of people, even now, with everybody online, well, nearly everybody online using the computers at home, that will have a computer that could be quickly refurbished or could be loaned. And if they could get in touch with their immediate local school, that would be very helpful. This isn't, of course, going to help the early years, who are not going to get any of this money, by the way, or the sixth form colleges or further education colleges that teach 16 to 19-year-olds, because they're not getting any of this money either, which I think is a great shame, because you'll probably be aware, I certainly am, because I got my qualifications through further education and my older sons went to further education colleges, that actually quite a lot of what the further education colleges are doing a catch up in terms of what happened in school days for some of the youngsters anyway, and is the great pipeline, if you like, from school into apprenticeships, university and life. So I'm sorry that they've not done that. But if we came together, for instance, in our communities for the summer, we could set up immediate facilities, we could get church halls open so that children could use those as well as the local school premises.
But then you need teachers for that, Lord Blunkett, don't you? You need teachers, and that seems to be the problem, that some teachers are very reluctant or very nervous to be back with their pupils.
Yes, which is why reducing to 1 metre for schools, as has been done in Northern Ireland and across Europe, why actually saying to supply teachers who are not getting any income at the moment, would you like to come back and help? There'll be people who are coming back from maternity leave or have only recently retired who would be able to help. But actually, in the end, it's about confidence. If the government exude confidence in terms of where we're going, what we're doing, the best scientific and medical evidence which shows that children don't transfer the virus to each other or to adults in any kind of the way that older people do, then we can build the confidence with parents, because that's crucial, and the confidence with teachers that they can go back to work comfortably. After all, tens of thousands of teachers have been teaching those with parents who are key workers, or some of the vulnerable, and it is only some of the vulnerable children we've managed to get back into school so far. So there are teachers out there not only doing a good job from home, but actually doing a job in the classroom. And we need to say to all their colleagues, look, if your colleagues and friends can actually do it, you can do it. And overcoming that fear, I think, is the challenge of the next few weeks and months, alongside innovation and creativity.
OK, well, let's hear the voice of the teachers now. Kevin Courtney joins us now from his home. Kevin is the National Education Union Joint General Secretary. Good morning to you, Kevin.
Morning.
You heard Lord Blunkett there. He keeps saying, you know, coming together, building up confidence and whatever. I mean, certainly you guys initially, I think you're quite aggrieved at being told what to do instead of being asked what to do. And there's been a big breakdown in communication. How close would you be to coming together? What is the major problem? What is the major concern? I mean, looking at Northern Ireland and the idea that they're going to reduce 2 metres to 1 metre. They're going to come back last week of August for schools there. Anything you can learn from what's going on there, or what's your view about what is happening in Northern Ireland?
You know, the scientists in Northern Ireland are saying that 1 metre is the right distance. So that makes it easier to get children back if that's the right distance. I agree with, I think, with almost everything that David Blunkett just said. It's important to welcome this £1 billion. And it's good that the government has put that up. But we have to remember there are 8 million school children. So that comes to about £120 per child. And that will go some way, but we think there's a lot more that needs to be done. There's the education gap, there's the socialisation gap, there's the exercise gap of children being in schools. So what we really have to be working on now is how do we get children back in September? And how do we get, and what we're hearing is the government saying that all children will be back in September. But what we're not clear about is whether they think the science will permit that to be in classes of 30. Because if it's a 1 metre social distance, then you can't have classes of 30. So we have to work on how do we get children back? Where do we find the extra space from? David just talked about church halls, getting teachers back who've left the profession. If we have to have social distancing and smaller group sizes, we want to get as many children back as we can, and that means more space.
So, Kevin, are you saying that you agree with Lord Blunkett that if you could find those available spaces, then the teachers would be happy to go there and have those smaller groups of children being able to social distance to get them back into education?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, I mean, our members are going back to school now. They're, you know, in primary schools, they're working with those year 6, years 1 and 3, years 1 and 2, and the children are back and the teachers are back with them. There are some teachers who are vulnerable, who've got clinical vulnerabilities, and they're making their contribution working from home. Hopefully, as the virus level drops, if the government stays in control of it and the virus level drops, then it gets safer and safer as time goes on. We've always been in favour of getting schools back as soon as it's safe to do so. And it's important to talk about the science about how you do that.
Kevin, hear what you're saying there. A lot of people will say, and there's a lot of concern when we talk about some kids come September, 6 months out of the classroom. I mean, goodness me, there are complaints of a child misses a day, 3 days or a week. We're talking about 6 months here. Is it right that we have all seemed to have given up, government, teaching, unions, whatever, on coming back before September?
I mean, they'll have missed a term and a half if they don't get back before September, and that is regrettable. The government did have, Boris Johnson announced on the 10th of May that all primary children would be back before the end of the summer term, and then he announced recently that, or Gavin Williamson announced that they were abandoning that. I think it was inevitable that they abandoned that. They didn't talk with teacher unions, with head teacher unions, with support staff unions about that proposal before they made it. And then it turned out that there just wasn't the space in the schools with the social distancing requirements that were in place. There wasn't the space to get children back in schools. Now, if they'd been talking with us, we would have spoken about that. We'd have looked at the possibility of extra spaces. And that's what we're advocating for from my union, the National Education Union. We want to get children back as soon as possible. We're pleased about this £1 billion, but it is £120 per child. And that may not be enough if we have to have classes of 15 in September. And it may be that we can get more children back in primaries and less in secondaries. That will depend on what the scientists' view is of what would happen to the R rate if children come back. But if there are, if we have to have smaller class sizes, if we have to have a class size of 15, then that either means that half the children are in 1 week and half the children are in the next week. That's one possibility, but that still means children at home, not in school, and that still means parents being
Kevin.
at home. So we're in favour of all the children being back, but that will need more teachers and more spaces if we have to have that class size of 15.
Kevin, Courtney, thank you very much indeed. David Blunkett, just last word. If you were, once again, Education Secretary, what would you do?
Well, I wouldn't have started from here, but we are on a totally different trajectory now. From today, if the government wish to, and they can actually mobilise in the way that's just been described, those of goodwill, we could do it. We could get more children back immediately in July, and we could ensure that all children get a full education in September, including those small tutoring groups, which are absolutely crucial to education recovery. And hearing Kevin Courtney this morning, I think we just draw a line under what's happened now, because we've got to, for the sake of our children, and say we are almost in a position of agreement. And if the government can show some leadership, and that can be cascaded down to the trusts and the local authorities to organise it, because it will be done at local level, not nationally, then there's a real opportunity to put right what has been neglected over the last 3.5 months. And I welcome that very strongly.
Thank you, David Blunkett. Thank you very much indeed. Lord Blunkett is a former Education Secretary.